this message is for the U.S. men's hockey team from a hockey fan married to a lifelong player raising a son in travel hockey.
Whether or not you know her name, there's a pretty good chance that you've run across one of Sara Wiles' videos. So I first saw her recently when she made a video that went viral about the U.S. women's hockey team and that joke that President Trump made in the locker room. You all remember that news story. 17 million views on her page alone, maybe 50 or 100 million across the entire internet. So I checked out some more of her videos and I was impressed because she wasn't just making videos online, she was actually going to Washington, D.C. She was pushing for change, she was doing the work. And not just that, this is all on top of a career that she built focused on helping women who've made the same realization that she did as a mom, that the working world kind of doesn't offer enough support to moms like her, or really families in general. So she took action, and she is still taking action today. Well, I want to introduce Sara Wiles, who I came across on Instagram a while ago, and I want to get into how that happened in a minute. But once I saw your content, I went down just a deep rabbit hole and just watching so many of your videos, a lot of dynamic stuff. You obviously have built up a pretty huge following. Anyway, I appreciate you hanging out with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat, and anytime we get to talk about what's happening and the nuance of it, I could sit here all day. So thank you for having me.
Good. Well, I want to talk about the video that landed you in my timeline, or at least the one that I noticed. And it was from a couple of weeks ago. It was on the heels of the U.S. women's national hockey team bringing home the gold, and the men doing the same thing, and Kash Patel being in the locker room. He's on the phone with President Trump, and they make a joke about inviting the girls to the White House, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to make a video.
Yeah.
Where in that process are you like, yep, this is my next Instagram post?
Well, I am married to a hockey player who played his whole life. He still plays in men's beer league. And I have a son who is in travel hockey. My life is literally hockey, Mark. We watch every single Panthers game. We are constantly, driving well over an hour to get to those games, and then doing it again to go home. My life is hockey. I live, breathe hockey.
You're immersed.
I'm so immersed. So it just felt like I know this culture, I know this world so well, and I felt uniquely qualified to have conversations on the topic, also as someone who very often speaks about women's issues and women's oppression. And it was really the convergence of all of those things that I am immersed in all of the time that just went boom, and I went, oh, okay, let's talk about that. And it popped.
I mean, it didn't just pop. What the view count, I think, when I last saw it was 16.5 million, and that's on Instagram.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What do you think we're at now?
I mean, on mine, I think it's around 17, but it got put on Facebook. Jen Psaki picked it up. It's on YouTube somewhere with 32 million views. I'm not even on YouTube yet. So I don't know who put it there. People grab it from all sorts of places. So I don't know. I should probably go look, but I didn't look.
It's safe to say that among all the platforms, it's been seen, let's just say conservatively, 50 million times.
Yes.
If, 75, it could be 100, who knows?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Your most successful video?
Yep.
Yeah. And what's the craziest thing that's come out of that experience? Aside from getting to talk to me, obviously.
I mean, obviously. What's the craziest thing that's come out of it? I got connected to the first openly gay male hockey player, professional male hockey player. That was a really cool conversation that I got to have and see the work that he does. I don't know, celebrities comment on stuff. I'm probably the wrong person to ask here, because at this point in what I've been doing, I have met so many politicians and, I have had celebrities comment on things, and it's really cool.
But I've seen some of your posts where you were, the Jim Psaki one I think you were excited about. I saw you
that was really cool. Yeah. It feels cool to feel acknowledged in the more political space for the work that I'm doing on social media. I think that was the coolest thing. But like, yeah, the celebrities are really cool, but then you're like, they're just people. Like, I cannot tell you the very first time that I went to DC in doing this work, and I get to meet, senators and Congress people and all of this stuff. And it's like you meet them and then you're like, oh, they're just people like everybody else is. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of like that varnish wears off a little bit.
Which is a good thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're all just people. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's really cool. I think for me, it's more so seeing the reaction. Like I had so many fathers in my DM saying, I am the parent of daughters and thank you so much for this. I had a dad who was like, hey, I actually originally saw this and thought this, right? Like I was like, why are people making a big deal out of this? And then I saw your video and I understood it better. So thank you for that. Like that to me means more than anything else because like that's my goal. I want people to be able to, that was the whole goal, right? Like, hey, hold on, think about this, look at it through this lens. And that is what I want you to use to change your belief and your opinion on this. And so when folks are reaching out saying that, like, that's the end of it. And then when women reach out and feel very, like, thank you for calling this out. I can't tell you how many women who either currently play sports or hockey at either a, high school, collegiate, or professional level, or who did in the past, reached out with personal stories. Like, that's it. That's the end for me. It's like, again, like, this is why I love this work because I get to have conversations with people like that, and I feel very lucky. So, yeah. But the Jen Psaki thing was very cool.
Yeah, well, seeing the reach of it was pretty awesome. And I do think, look, if you are on here because some people are on here because they want clout or they want views or they want to feel like a Broadway star or whatever. I think if you are pushing a message, you want to feel like it was heard, firstly, and then that it made someone think or maybe even change their mind. I think, that's ultimately, or why would you even, kind of push a message? So I think all of those things kind of track with that. But when you see the reach, you realize the power of, I think that's when social media works. And when it's for good is that we can, amplify those kind of posts and not obsess over some of the very, 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 very many bad aspects of social media. So I imagine there was still a lot of kind of pinch me like, I can't believe you're like, my phone is blowing up.
Yeah. I mean, that one took off fast. So I knew very quickly that one was going to pop based on how many comments and shares that we got very quickly. And it's pretty cool. But also just like the news moves so fast. That was, at the time of this recording, that was last week. And then we bombed Iran. You know what I mean? Like there's so many insane things happening. You just kind of move on very quickly because there's too many other things to go focus on. So it was very, very cool. And then we just keep doing the work because there's just more shit that we have to keep talking about. So.
Well, I'm curious if you had to sum up for, I don't know, let's say you were a guest on a podcast and that podcast was about dream jobs and the host asked you, what do you do for a living, Sara? How would you describe that? Because you have this business that you have built on your own and there's a story there and you have this online community that you've grown. How do you sum that all up?
It depends who's asking. If it's someone that I am not interested in having a nuanced, in-depth conversation with, I have been known to simplify and just say, I just do social media so I don't get into this whole conversation because, not only do I exist on the social media side doing something that a lot of just, regular people, a lot of muggles don't really understand what it is we do online. My business that actually makes me money also people don't understand. And so my background is in corporate event planning. I did that for 8 years. And then I had a baby. And it turns out that traveling for 10 days at a time and sleeping an average of 4 hours a night and nursing a newborn, those things don't really go together. And the company that I worked for was owned by a man who didn't have a lot of compassion or empathy or understanding at all for how much my life had changed and how much I needed my role in the company to change in order to help me be a mother. And so I left that career that I spent 8 years busting my butt for and flailed. And I didn't know what to do. And I had a friend at the time who said, there's this thing called virtual assisting. And it's essentially just you figure stuff out for people who have businesses online. And that's all that corporate event planning is, right? Like it's just, okay, let me go Google, let me go figure things out. It was super resourceful. And So I did that. I grew, I became a virtual assistant. We had so many clients that I grew a team of 8 all moms who worked for me and helped us service our clients. And then at a point I realized I'm actually a horrible people manager, horrific at it, and I am better at teaching. And at the same time, so many friends from, college and high school and just growing up, women, mothers, were coming to me new in their motherhood saying, how are you doing this? Because I also can't make work and motherhood work at the same time. It's not flexible enough. And so I realized that there was a gap there, and I wanted to teach people how to do the business side of it because, my deepest belief is like, if you are a resourceful human being, we have the internet, it's 2026, you can figure anything out, right? But you have to understand how to run it on the back end. And so that's what I've been doing since 2017 is teaching other women around the world, but primarily in the US, how to start businesses as virtual assistants so that they can have more flexibility in their life. And so I've always been someone who's been marketing online and who's been selling online and has been in front of, a video camera and posting online for a while. And I think that made starting to use my personal platform to speak about all of the things happening in our country right now a whole lot easier for me because I already knew how to do a lot of it. I didn't know how to do it for these topics, but my brain works in terms of marketing and conversions and sales. And even though there's no sale that I'm making at all, my brain still works in terms of like, well, what do I want them to do? Okay, well, today I want them to sign this petition to help get this mother who's been detained by ICE, in Arizona released. That's how I think about it now. And so I think my sales and marketing background has really helped me in that way.
You've had this circuitous route, this journey. I mean, and this is called the Dream Job Podcast because on some level, these are dream jobs for people. Was this what you ever dreamed of, or has it become the dream now?
It is the dream. It's so funny because when I started as a virtual assistant, I had tried things in the past. I had done a yoga teacher training. I taught yoga for 6 months, and I was like, I suck at this. This is not the thing that I'm going to be in the world, right? And
what did 10-year-old Sara think was the goal?
Oh, gosh. I wanted to be a Broadway star, even though I have no singing or dancing or acting abilities at all.
Still, don't let that get in the way of a dream.
Amen. Yeah, so I do think, though, I really do feel like this is my dream job. And, there, as I'm sure there are pretty real risks associated with this, and there are security concerns that my family and I have had to take on because of this. But at every turn, I always think that I will regret not doing this 20 years from now, 50 years from now, if I live that long, God willing, if I don't speak now. And so that is kind of where I land.
Like you've kind of created this dream and your job is you've got, like you mentioned, the paying job, you've got the social work that you do, social media stuff. And so it feels like you've kind of crafted what works for you and feeds you and nourishes you and your family and all that kind of stuff. You've kind of built this and figured it out as you go on.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I also feel really grateful for because this wouldn't be an option 30 years ago. Neither of the businesses that I run would be an option 30 years ago, and I feel really grateful and aware of the fact that this is something that we can even do now that we couldn't in the past.
And on the business side, are you only targeting women and moms specifically?
Primarily women. Every now and then we get a couple men that sign up and ask if it's okay. And we're like, come on in. It's just, we're going to call you girl and women and woman. And we're going to speak about, the sales and marketing, hiccups that women predominantly make because of our social conditioning and the way that we are raised. But yeah, have at it. Come on in. We just don't market to them.
So when you canvassing your content, you obviously you push a lot of progressive stances. You push a lot of female empowerment. A lot of you talked about ICE a moment ago. I want to get into kind of how you got into that space in the first place. But have your perspectives evolved over time, or have you kind of always felt this way, or what's that journey been like?
I come from a family of very strong women. And so I was smiling in the intro because you said something about, I don't even remember exactly what you said, but I just remember in my brain going, oh yeah, I know why that is. It's very clear why that is. I just come from a family of strong women. And so being a woman who is loud and bold and uses her voice was never abnormal to me. This is normal. This is how we all are. But I grew up with grandparents who lived in New York City. My grandmother was a public school art teacher for 40 years, and then she worked for the teachers union. And so I spent a lot of my childhood with them listening to PBS and NPR and just understanding politics and our country through their lens because they were the most politically engaged in my family. So I've always been, I don't think I would have called myself progressive then. I certainly do now. I think I would have just called myself a Democrat. We have a very diverse family of beliefs and opinions. And it's always been something that I've cared about. It's just never something that I thought would be part of my work in the world outside of door knocking and, phone banking, which I've always done for, elections because it just felt like the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So there was a foundation there, but door knocking is different than having an Instagram account with, 1/3 followers. And I'm curious where that world, kind of entered your life and that growth.
Yeah. So on the business side, on my virtual assistant training side, I always kind of dropped subtle hints. That business doesn't exist without the oppression of women in this country, right? Like the only reason that business exists is because we don't have a country that supports women, and we most certainly do not have a country that supports mothers. And so to me, it always...
Pause for just a second, because as you say that, I think some people will hear that and be like, what are you talking about? They don't maybe have the exposure to having been a mom in the workplace, or maybe it's a dude who looks like me who runs a company and he thinks like, why am I paying for maternity leave? Why am I paying for someone to, have to go deal with their kids all the time? So can you just real quickly, what ways do you think moms lack that support?
Yeah. I mean, leave, just any sort of maternity leave at all. And I know that we're existing in a country where we look at this potential of having paid leave as this big, huge expense that we would have to have. And we don't ever consider we're such a business and financial driven country, right? We live in a capitalist society. And we very rarely consider the policies and supports that we need in place to make the human beings that are responsible for business growth feel supported and thrive. Like paid maternity leave, I mean, I wouldn't even go there. Like that's not even my first hit, right? Because that feels like such a pipe dream at this point. But yeah, I mean, paid leave, paternal leave as well. There's something called the motherhood gap. And so for every child a woman has, she decreases her amount that she will make over a lifetime and also decreases her pay in comparison to non-mothers and men, whether they are fathers or not, in the workplace. There is also a fatherhood, I don't remember the exact word, but if there is a motherhood penalty, there is a fatherhood, whatever the opposite of that is. What would we call that?
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
A bonus,
There's
perhaps?
A fatherhood. Yes, a fatherhood bonus where men actually make more money the more children that they have. Right. Right. And people don't know that, right? Yeah. So we're dealing with the motherhood penalty. We're dealing just across the board with gender pay gaps, right? We're dealing with barriers to access any sort of financial resources at all, which is a big reason why the training that we do is important because the barrier to entry in that industry is so low that it makes it so accessible to women. So there's a lot of issues here that make it really freaking hard for women to work, even though we have to work to make money to support our families.
The reason I wanted to kind of pause and kind of hit that is because I think when you know the issues, it's really easy to kind of lump them ahead. But I think there's a lot of people who, maybe they haven't had experience with it, or they just think, like, from a spreadsheet perspective, like, why am I paying someone to take 6 months off? Why am I paying this? Why am I paying that? And I think, one, you have the opportunity cost of you've got a great employee that you lose if you don't pay that to. Two, when you look at the countries that have really leaned in to things like maternity leave, paternity leave, the more flexible work hours for parents, the productivity drop is not what you would think if you're just thinking from a spreadsheet perspective. B, the cost is not what you'd think in terms of just dollars and cents and hours. And especially for those places that really have built in the support, let's say you have maternal leave insurance to help your business pay for that. It's pennies on the dollar. And the ROI you get is through the roof. The workplace, what's the word I'm looking for? The
culture?
The culture, yes, thank you. The workplace culture that you build is more inclusive. You have so many benefits that don't show up immediately on the spreadsheet, but at the end of the day, I think do benefit your business and benefit society at large. And it's amazing, I think, if I can stay on my soapbox for another second, how many people talk about family values but don't value the family and what it needs to succeed. So, all of that helped you do what you do.
Yeah. Right. So the business wouldn't exist without these issues. So to me, it always felt very disingenuous to not say that. But I would have said it softer in the past. And then, this last election happened. And I sat outside here the morning after with my dog and my son in my lap. And I just sobbed because I none of us really knew what we were in for, but we knew it was going to be horrific. And I just had a moment where I thought, okay, I've done election work. I've done these phone banking. I've knocked on 9 million doors. I've done things. But I think I'm at a moment and I have a skill set where I could use it to do more. And I think that even though it's scary to put yourself out there like that, you worry about what is the pushback going to be like, especially for me. I live in Florida and I tend to live in my town leans very conservative here. It's scary to consider that. But then on the other hand, I also have to remember that I'm a white woman I have a home, I have a roof over my head. I have no problem paying any of my bills. We are a 2-income family, right? And so if anybody is going to be doing the risky work, and I'm putting risky in air quotes because there's so many more things that are a whole lot more risky than what I'm doing, even though there is risk associated with this, right? Isn't this what I'm exactly supposed to be doing as a white woman in this country right now, is taking ownership for the people who I perceive as being part of the reason why this election went the way that it did. And we're just experiencing and watching, horrific injustice and dehumanization of human beings on a daily level. I think that's actually my job right now. And so I just started doing it.
And when was this? After this last election?
Yeah, I would say.
Is that when you saw the growth kind of take off?
So I started doing it very softly. I would say probably from January to March. And then by the time it was March of 2025, I pushed the envelope a little bit more and said things that in my brain I would have went oh, I don't know if this is going too far, but I'm just going to say it anyway. So let's see what happens. And that is really when things started taking off, because I think, I had things to say and ways of saying them. And there are people who don't often see themselves reflected in those opinions and conversations. I'm speaking to white women specifically, especially suburban white women. And, I think that there's a lot of people who felt similarly, but didn't feel safe enough to have those conversations out loud. And we started learning that very quickly.
So what was your follower count when you started this? And is it all pretty much Instagram for you mainly? Is that where you really have seen the biggest splash?
Yeah, we're trying to be on the other platforms, but doing 2 things at once and having a child in travel sports is very hard. But yeah, Instagram is my main platform. It's, I'm an elder millennial, so Instagram is what I love. I don't know our exact numbers, but I would bet that we were between 20 and 40,000 followers.
Okay.
Before we really started having conversations.
All right. So you've seen basically 10x in a year, 10x growth roughly, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I don't do math, but
so
I believe
was there a specific post that you really saw a bump, or one where the light bulb really turned on?
Yeah. So there is a post, and we talked a little bit about nuance and intentionality, and like geeking out over like the tiny little minuscule details that actually make a really big difference. And I'm going to tell you what the post was about, but first I'm going to tell you what I looked like wearing it because it was intentional.
Okay.
I wore a pink shirt and I wore bright pink lipstick.
Okay.
And so I had a conversation about women who have conversations with men where they say that they don't like feminism.
Okay.
And women who feel like they can't be aligned with feminism because it's not attractive to men.
Okay.
And what I connected the dots through is actually, let me explain what feminism is, and let me explain to you the very specific things that women have access to right now in our country, including many women who very often are saying, I'm not a feminist, except they have access to a cell phone, except they are posting about the fact that they're not feminists in their own voice on their own social media platform, except that they are running a business, right? Doing that and making money, which is something that they would not have had access to, all of those things without feminists who came before them who said, no, that's actually not okay. Women should have access to everything that men have access to. And so I strung that along, and I gave some dates in terms of when we got access to those things. And really, as I tied it up in a bow at the end, what I said was, people who say that they don't like feminism actually just don't like that you get access to things that they already have. And at the end of the day, if there are men who are not attracted to you because you believe that you should have equal access, I just don't know that those are folks that you want to be talking to or dating. My God. That was the first one that I felt like I was taking a risk there, and it went off, and I was like, oh, okay, so when you say the thing out loud, that's the thing. Especially when you say it looking like someone who you wouldn't traditionally think that you would hear those conversations from.
Well, so how would you, because I think, and maybe some of this is people, argue about what feminism is. How would you define that term?
Oh, that is so hard. Honestly, if I were to define it, what I would want to do is go grab my Bell Hooks book right now and find her exact definition, because I would never want to, first of all, not give credit to that incredible Black woman, and second, try to run my way into that definition. But I think,
what do you think it means for you though? How does it? Because again, if there's a disagreement over what it means, and you're like, no, I think how you've seen it mean. I mean, you just talked about it. It is those hard-earned rights that again are taken for granted, because I think when you're used to things being a certain way, you can't imagine them not being that way.
Yeah. Choice, access, and rights. That's it. And I think there's interesting conversation, that maybe you see or maybe you don't because of the spaces that you exist in. But, there's so much conversation about trad wives. And some of the things that we will see them say are there was this viral social media post that was going around where a woman was holding a newborn baby, and she was saying, an entire group of people spent money to try to convince you that this is wrong. And it's so wild because it's and then you just know that those are not, good faith arguments at all, because it's I nursed my child. Sorry. I mean, I think you're a father. Are you a father? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
3.
Okay. So we're just going to have this conversation. I nursed that kid for almost 3 fucking years. Let me just tell you about choice, right? Nobody wants to dictate what it is that you have to do. What we want is that you have the choice. It's not your government telling you that you have to do this. It is not your husband telling you that you have to do this. It is not your church telling you that you have to do this. It is you being at choice and having the access to all of the things that all of the men have and the same exact rights. That's it. I love it. I mean, are you kidding? I had an unpaid maternity leave so that I could stay home with my child for 3 months. Girl, that's not what we're saying.
It's interesting because you talked about your mom and the women that were, in your family kind of growing up. So my mom, as a kid with 4 kids, went back to college and got her master's degree and got her doctorate. And I come from similarly a family of really strong women, but just strong in character and spirit and could do anything. And my mom is definitely like somebody who can work a drill, can sew an entire outfit, can run a CAD program and design patterns. I mean, again, got her PhD with 4 kids, all under the age of like 12, I think, at the time.
Wow.
So like that was just normal for me. And I went to a church where there were women in leadership, female youth ministers, eventually female pastors and that kind of thing. So it didn't seem normal to me, the idea of feminine strength and feminine power. I think, though, becoming a dad and having a wife who's dealing with everything you described, maternity leave and, nursing and pregnancy and kids and the whole 9 yards, and then seeing her work in a space, too, where they're trying to stand up for, women who've been dealt with traffic and sexual assault and all that stuff, is just this increasing awareness of all the things we've talked about. But I am curious, we sometimes get caught up on these ideas of fairness and equality and equity, and we want to make things the same when I think there's a celebration in feminism of femininity in women that is, I hate to use the term separate but equal, but is saying we want just the same things everybody else wants. Like, we want what the guys have, and for whatever reason have been keeping us from having. And I think that phrase comes to mind. When you've been, and I'm going to mess it up, but when you've been privileged, equality looks like oppression.
Yep.
I mean, I feel that at so many different turns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's really hard.
There. I know I just kind of dumped on you.
No. And I mean, I think to me, that's where the politics comes into play, right? Because it's like, okay, well then let's look at who's in Congress. Who's in charge of setting our policy and our legislation to make this, right? Like, we could have federally mandated maternity leave. Many countries do, right? And what's the reason that we don't have it? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but if we really just want to make and just be as simple as possible, we can look at the makeup of our Congress. And what's the makeup of our Congress? Okay, well, I'll Google it right now. What is the gender and age makeup of the current U.S. Congress, right? The 119th U.S. Congress includes 28% women.
Higher than I would have expected. But that's higher than I would have thought.
Sure. But then think about the percentage of the population that women are. Right. Yeah. No, totally. Right. And so, and like, we are just getting there. That was, and this is not a commentary that will go off on Nancy Pelosi, right? But like when Nancy Pelosi ran for office, that was the age of the women. That was when women really started paying attention to and not paying attention, but, feeling that there was a place for them in Congress. And it has been a very slow progress to get there to 28%. So the reason that women's issues are not paid attention to is because the people in charge have no visibility of them at all, nor do they want them.
What I think is interesting, though, is I think you've seen corporate America, I don't want to say by and large, but you have certainly seen examples of corporations kind of waking up to this and saying, okay, we've got to lean in, if not necessarily in terms of representation on their boards and in their C-suites, in terms of policies and how they affect their workers. And then, as you mentioned, we have an election and a administration now that wants to roll back, that has made DEI a 4-letter word. And I feel like a lot of the progress that's been there has been curtailed governmentally, that corporations have figured out, hey, there's a dollars and cents benefit to us, and this is just who we want to be, whether it's because we better reach our audiences or whatever, it better serves our employees. And now you have an administration that says, no, we don't want this.
Yeah.
What do you think is driving that? What perspective, what idea?
I think that we have a government right now. I think we have leadership who is beckoning us back to a time in the past when there was no one ever sharing power except for white Christian men, and white Christian heterosexual cisgendered men, right? And anybody else is in their minds is a threat to what they believe, and what they believe is that they are supreme and they want all the power. And so that's a really easy thing to sell when you are existing in a country that is increasingly expensive to live in. It, is an easy sell for people too who, I will blame, I don't know if you want to go here, but I will. And you can cut out whatever you want. But, the Democratic Party is not great at messaging. And I know that that's been said 9 million times, but even right now, there's so much crap happening in this country that is horrific and inhumane. And we have nothing to run towards that we're giving this country, right? Now, Trump has all these horrific policies and all of these horrific things that he does, but what are people thinking that they're running towards? Well, they're going to make America great again. Back when it was affordable to live. Back when women could stay at home and you didn't need 2 incomes to run a household. Back when, which by the way, that back when didn't exist, right? Maybe some of it did. But women were not happy in those roles, let's be real. And for certain people, thank you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really big issue is what are we telling people to run at instead of telling them what to run against?
To me, there's this cognitive dissonance with the idea being pitched because it ignores, okay, if you want to make America great again, you want to go back to the 1950s, then let's go back to the 1950s progressive taxation levels. Well, no, not that. You don't think that some of what we got back then was allowed because of the way that society was taxed and you didn't have the wealth inequality that you have? You don't think that had a role on housing? You don't think that played a role on, worker happiness? You didn't have the big gap between the lowest paid worker and the highest paid worker. So we know that leads to happiness outcomes and so many other, there's so many layers to that. If you want to go back to 1950, let's think long and hard before we start treading in that direction. Or it's only you want to pick and choose which parts of 1950 you want to go back to, and only the ones that benefit you.
Yep, you know it.
So I think that's the cognitive dissonance there. But I think you're starting to hear people asserting, "Hey, this is no longer this left and right issue necessarily. It's a top-bottom issue." And if you blurred the top, if you could compress that gap, some of the left-right stuff might work itself out.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I only say that because, again, I think you and I sitting here in our white bodies can say that. But when I speak to my friends of color and when I speak to my friends who are in the queer community, they don't share that same belief. And I think that makes total sense because we're coming at it from our lived experience, which is totally different than theirs. But in general, I agree with you, right? It's there is the billionaire Epstein class and there's the rest of us. And the gap between being a millionaire and a billionaire is insane. You are, as a millionaire or a multimillionaire, you are closer to being broke under a bridge than you are closer to being a billionaire. And so I agree. And I think the beautiful thing about, for me, just what I believe in terms of being a progressive person is that I want progress for everyone. I don't want it just for me and just for my child. I very much believe that when we take care of the, most vulnerable in our population, everybody flourishes. I don't need to do it for that reason, but hey, if that's how we need to sell it, that you'll actually do better if you care about people, fine. But that's it at the end of the day. And that includes every single person in this country who is not a billionaire.
Well, and I think too, the idea that maybe someday I'll be a billionaire kind of lingers in people's minds. And so they want to push policies that can help them maybe someday be that one so that I don't have to pay those taxes. And it's kind of for the vast percentage of American history, we didn't have this level of inequality because of tax policy, and people weren't screaming from the rooftops back then the way we are now about some of that stuff. But tax policy could be a whole separate chat. I'm curious because you talked before about some of the costs of being outspoken on social media. Aside from just the crazies who send you wacky DMs and maybe you're a little off the rails and the scary aspect of that.
Yeah.
What costs have you experienced?
Okay. I'm going to share this from my perspective, but I also want to just say that I know that this is not the same perspective that most people have. I think part of this is like, I come at this as an almost 40-year-old woman. I'm pretty solid in who I am. And I'm really okay if standing on my beliefs makes someone leave. You know what I mean? Like if I lose someone, I'm okay with that. And I know that that doesn't feel the same for a lot of people.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I go and drop my son off at school and there are people who like just think I'm the worst human in the whole wide world and won't even look at me in the eyeballs because like I dare to speak about ICE or stand up for people or like, you know, personally, I'm just a natural oversharer by nature. I have ADHD and apparently those two things are intertwined, you know, but like I speak very publicly about my mental health and, you know, the medication that I take to manage that. And, you know, there's a lot of people that don't want to shine a light on vulnerability because it makes them feel really uncomfortable. And then they project that outwards, right? And now it's like, I'm the devil. And I'm okay. But that's the thing is like, that's a cost for me that's worth taking on. But I also understand that I've been showing up online and have had people say horrendous shit to me for 8 years. So, you know, like it doesn't sting as bad. But yeah, there are people who in my town who think I'm just the worst human in the whole wide world. And I'm okay with that.
But nothing along the way that made you think, oh gosh, should I really be doing this?
I'm sure you can understand this as a husband, you know, but there are times when my husband is very concerned and he's like, listen, I know that this is the work that you want to do and this is so important for you and I'm always going to support you in that. And sometimes it gets really scary, you know?
That's fair. Well, yeah. I think there's a couple things go along here. One, it's choosing, is this hill worth dying on? You know, is this the battle to fight? Will this win me the war? Or is this one I can just let go? I think there's some of that. I think there's also a sense of, this is something I have felt going back to COVID and I think the Black Lives Matter movement, that if something doesn't have a potential cost, it might not be worth doing. Or let me flip that around. Anything that is going to be good and have a good outcome, I think by and large has a potential cost. You want to be healthy. You know what?
Yeah.
That means you can't eat sweets all the time. It also means you probably got to go to the gym. There's going to be a cost there. There's got to be some effort.
Yeah.
But that's not the cost the same way as if you look back at the civil rights movement. There was a line in, I don't know if it's Glennon Doyle's book, I can't remember which one, but a mom's talking to her daughter about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and the civil rights movement and the marches, and the kid asks the mom like, hey, would we have marched? And the mom's like, no. Why not? We're not marching now. And she made the point that it was really easy in 2026 to stand up and say, I believe in Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
It was really hard to say that when he was marching.
Yeah.
And if you can't say it now by going to march with the people now, then would you have done it then? No. And that's just like once you see it, that you can't unsee that. Yeah. So it feels like those costs are a necessary part of it. Maybe it's just like, is this the right one at the right time, maybe?
Yeah. And, you know, and I think it's important to say too, you know, like there's a role for everybody in this. And some people are protesters and some people are door knockers and some people are canvassers and some people are loudmouths on social media. Like there is a lane for every single person. But whatever lane you pick, there is going to be a cost associated with standing up for what's right. And I love that you brought up the civil rights movement because, you know, so much of what I've done over the last year is remind myself that I'm not the first person to do any of this. In fact, you know, more marginalized people and primarily Black and brown folks and queer folks have been doing this work forever. So like, I just need to go look at what they've done and be really rooted in that truth. And also remind myself that all of these things that we love right now, right? Like Social Security, civil rights, you know, women having the right to vote, Black folks having the right to vote. Those were all very unpopular at the time. Those people were not, right? Like we look at them now like, yeah, of course we have all of those things that we have. But people fought like hell to get those against people who looked at them and said, no way in hell, you're insane. And this is like the point that I so want people to understand. Change has almost never happened in this country because politicians woke up one day and went, you know what? I don't know why we're not letting the women vote. This is, you know what? Guys, let's gather around the table here come into the Oval Office. Let's talk about the women. I think they need rights. I think they should vote. It's never happened like that.
Today. Let's let them.
It's never happened like that. It has always been everyday citizens standing up and going, this is wrong, and the rest of the country going, you're crazy. Every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. A union conversation, again, is an entirely different conversation as well, but it's like, we have weekends because unions fought for them. We
40-hour work week.
Weeks and overtime because unions fought for them. And, at a minimum.
Thank the union.
Yeah, you hope that if you have at least an understanding of that, you can kind of better appreciate the role that plays.
Yeah, I mean, if you mess with American history and make sure that children aren't taught actual American history, then it becomes really easy to create something like this, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have a connection to the past. I didn't. There's so many things I'm learning now that I absolutely did not learn growing up in Florida public schools.
Sure. Well, and for me, growing up in Texas public schools, I specifically was taught by at least one teacher that the Civil War was not about slavery, it was over states' rights.
Yes, of course. Absolutely.
And, if that's the lens that you view things through, it takes a while. Why would you challenge that as a 10-year-old kid?
You wouldn't.
And then maybe a 15-year-old kid, and then a 20-year-old. Like, you've got to figure out how to cross over and be like, oh, that was wrong.
Wow. Yeah.
So
yeah.
But those become fundamental beliefs, and you're starting to take down that wall. So
yeah.
Now I'm curious. We haven't talked about this at all, but you brought up before the trad wives, and I think kind of white Christian America. Has faith played a role in this for you? Has it affected any pursuit here?
So this is interesting. I was raised Jewish, but not religious. So both of my parents come from Jewish backgrounds, but neither one of them felt a strong pull to the religion. And so I was mostly raised culturally Jewish, not religiously Jewish. I've never opened a Bible in my life. I couldn't tell you a story. Like, I have a best friend who, quotes the Bible upwards, downwards, backwards, forwards, and she will tell me things. And I'm like, girl, I don't know David. I don't know what you're talking. Like, I have no... And I think that is so abnormal in this country. And so in some ways, I'm sure it helps me, and in some ways I'm sure it harms me because I just don't have that foundation and rooting. So I think for me, there's a lot of these conversations that feel so wild to me because I have no experience of being in a religious situation where, patriarchy or white supremacy or any of those things are rooted in my upbringing.
Sure.
But I will say from a cultural standpoint, the things that I do know about Judaism and the parts of Judaism that my grandparents grounded me in feel very in alignment for me in terms of the way that I show up in the world, right? So my religion is weird.
No, I find it fascinating because I grew up, going to church, but in a church that was very welcoming of diverse perspectives and the debates that you might have about it, and the idea that, but definitely the idea that you're called to serve and to take care of the least of these, whomever that might be. And so I think that informed my perspective. And then growing up and saying oh, there are a substantial number of Christians in America who think you should not feed the poor. Where does
that come from? Can I ask, I'm actually genuinely curious how that, what is the argument there, and what would that conversation look like?
So I think there is, personally, I think if you read the Old Testament and you read the New Testament, I think it is really hard to find agreement there in terms of what we're elevating as the goal here. I think the Old Testament is very much about following the rules and doing it right. And I think the New Testament is very much about dying to self so that you can help others and serve others. And it is not about that I do everything right, that I follow all the rules perfectly. It is more about, am I loving and lifting up other people? That's how I perceive it. But I think the follow the rules side of it is that appeals to some people. It feels good to feel like I'm doing the right thing. It feels there's something about it that appeals to some aspect of human nature, and I think that's why you see fundamentalism work in a variety of world religions going back for centuries. I think a big takeaway for me, and I talked about this in a thing on toxic masculinity, is this is not new. We have been drawing lines and separating people based on who's in and who's out and trying to police behavior for centuries. So you're not doing anything new there. And maybe that appeals to people. I personally think we should be growing as people and getting better over time. And by better, not like, are we more perfect?
Wealthier.
But better are we in community?
I just, because I have no religious footing at all, it is always like so mind blowing for me. And so I'm always so curious to hear that information. So thank you for sharing that.
It's been really cool hearing about your professional pursuits and the kind of dream job you've created there. But I feel like, the work online is another kind of version of that you've created for yourself. Is there a hope when it's all said and done? Is there kind of like a goal, a dream that you think, I really want to get, my online voice to this or my audience to that? Is there some kind of dream you're hoping to achieve?
It's so funny because I was driving in the car on my way home from my son's hockey practice, as I do 4 days a week. And I was just thinking to myself on that car ride home, like, I already feel like I made it, and I have never felt like that in my entire life. Like, I think that, yes, there are goals and there are more things that I would like to do, and I would love to write a book one day and all of that. But like, I don't feel so attached to those like numbers or goals like I have been in the past, because I already just feel so lucky to be doing this work right now, even though it is like heavy and horrific and like, my God, how are we in this time right now? I also just feel like this was part of the work that I was, put on this earth to do, if that's a thing that happens. I don't know. I told you I'm weird with religion and how things work. So like, yeah, there are goals, but like if I just continued on doing this for the rest of my life, I think I would feel very lucky. So I have run a small business for long enough. We've made over, $5 million in sales doing digital marketing and online work, right? Like I've hit the milestones. I've done the things. I've been at the places where my brain convinced me, oh, you'll finally feel enough when you hit this level. You'll finally feel successful or professional. And I've done that enough to know you don't. It's only how you feel in here. And so, yeah, I'd love to keep doing this work and continue to do it and grow it. But at the end of the day, like, I just feel very lucky to be here right now. So,
well, I'm lucky that you chatted with me. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Sara Wiles, everybody. Of course, you can find her on Instagram. Just search Sara Wiles. And a huge thanks to her for being so generous with her time. And as always, to you for listening. Until next time. I'm Mark Istook, and this is the Dream Job Podcast.